They told me I was being honored, that my family's legacy was at stake, that marrying him wasn't sacrifice, it was duty. But the truth? Duty was just a prettier word for ownership. The night before the wedding, I walked the vineyard in silence, row after row of Cabernet vines whispering like witnesses to something unholy. The air tasted wrong, like copper and rot beneath the sweetness of grapes. My family's estate wasn't built on soil. It was built on buried lies. My father said this marriage would save us from ruin. 75 million in debt, and the man at the altar was our salvation. Julian Vance, a name spoken with reverence in every investor's circle, a man of poise, precision, and secrets. The ceremony felt rehearsed, too perfect, too controlled. I remember the murmurs of guests, the flash of cameras, and the tight smile painted across my mother's face. But behind the illusion of wealth, the air was heavy, like the moment before a confession. As my father placed my hand into Julian's, I saw something flicker behind his eyes. Not affection, not triumph, something colder, recognition. He looked at me like someone who already knew everything I'd been forced to ignore, like he'd been waiting for this moment, not to unite families, but to settle something much older. When the priest said, "Speak now or forever hold your peace," the wind shifted through the vines, and for a brief moment, I swear I heard a whisper. Not from any guest, not from any living soul, a voice low and distant carried on the air. "You're not being married, child, you're being inherited." The candle flames wavered, the crowd leaned forward, my pulse quickened. Julian's gaze didn't waver. He looked at me and smiled. That was the moment I knew. Whatever was about to happen wasn't about love, or even money. It was about legacy. The kind that rots from the inside yet demands to be preserved. And I was about to discover what my family was truly willing to sacrifice to keep their empire alive. I woke before dawn, the vineyard still drowned in the silence that comes before confession. The dress hung in the corner like a ghost waiting for possession. Every thread, every pearl, paid for with someone else's suffering. My father's footsteps echoed down the hallway outside, that familiar rhythm of control masquerading as concern. In his world, emotion was weakness, and obedience was love. When he knocked, I already knew what he'd say. "It's time, Angela." His voice was calm, like a man walking his daughter to a sacrificial altar instead of a wedding. The air outside carried that crisp scent of grapes about to ripen, the kind I used to love when I worked these fields as a girl. But now it felt different. The vines looked like veins, pulsing beneath the earth, feeding on something older, something darker than wine. I thought about the workers whose hands had built this place, the 47 families depending on my compliance. My parents said I was saving them, that this marriage would preserve everything we'd built, but the truth tasted bitter. What they'd built wasn't worth saving. Julian waited at the altar, motionless. The sun caught the edges of his suit, but his eyes remained cold, unreadable. I'd studied hundreds of men like him in my father's boardrooms, calculating, reserved, the kind who saw people as investments. But when he looked at me, something in his gaze shifted. He wasn't admiring a bride, he was assessing a variable. As vows were spoken, my mother's smile never faltered. She had the kind of beauty that aged like a blade, polished, sharp, and lethal. She believed control was the highest form of love, and this wedding, this performance, was her masterpiece. When Julian slid the ring onto my finger, I didn't feel bound to him. I felt bound to the lie that birthed this empire. The band was platinum, smooth and flawless, a perfect circle, just like the cycle of deceit it represented. My father's hand tightened around my shoulder as the guests applauded. I could feel his relief disguised as pride. The vineyard was safe, the debt was gone, his daughter had been converted into capital. But as the applause echoed across the vines, Julian leaned close, his breath brushing my ear, calm, deliberate, terrifyingly intimate. "They think this saves them," he whispered. "They don't know what I know." And for the first time that day I felt something pierce through the numbness, not fear, not anger, but the faint electric hum of recognition. Whatever he knew, it wasn't about love, it was about power, and I was standing in the center of its exchange. That night the house was too quiet. Even the walls seemed to hold their breath. After the endless photographs, the toasts, and the hollow laughter, we returned to the estate, a place that no longer felt like home. The servants had been dismissed early. My parents retreated to their wing of the mansion, whispering in voices that trembled beneath the weight of relief. The deal was done, their debt erased, their legacy was saved. But as I stepped into the master bedroom, our bedroom, I realized Julian wasn't celebrating. He stood by the window, staring out into the vineyard, his reflection fragmented across the glass like a man made of pieces that didn't fit together. The moonlight traced the edge of his jaw, revealing a calm that was almost rehearsed. I tried to speak, but he interrupted me with the same quiet authority that had unsettled me since the ceremony. "You have their eyes," he said softly, "but not their silence." I froze. He turned toward me, the faintest shadow of a smile crossing his face. Not warm, not cruel, just knowing. "Your father thinks I married you for the land," he continued. "For the vineyards, the name, the influence, but I didn't." His words hung in the air like smoke. "Then why did you?" I whispered. He stepped closer, every movement deliberate like a man approaching truth itself. "Because someone has to end what your family began," he said, "and I needed to get inside the walls to do it." The silence that followed wasn't peaceful, it was surgical, sharp, meant to cut through generations of deceit. Julian reached into his pocket and placed a folded letter on the dresser between us. The paper was yellowed and brittle, dated 32 years ago. "My birth year. Your parents built their empire on blood and forgery," he said. "This," he tapped the paper, "is proof." My hands trembled as I reached for it, but he stopped me. "Not yet," he said. "You're not ready to see what they traded to keep their name alive." Outside, thunder rolled low across the hills. The vines swayed like mourners at a funeral, only they remembered. In that moment, the truth no longer felt like salvation. It felt like possession. Julian turned away, his voice almost tender now. "I didn't come to destroy you, Angela," he said. "But you deserve to know who you were sold to, and why." And before I could answer, he whispered something that made my heart stop cold. "Your father wasn't saving the family legacy. He was saving himself. From me." Rain began to fall that night, soft at first, then harder, like the sky itself was confessing. I sat by the window, staring at the letter Julian had left unopened on the dresser. The ink had bled slightly with time, the seal cracked and faded, but the name written across it, the Vance estate, felt alive. It pulsed like a wound that never healed. Down the hall, the walls creaked with the groans of a dying mansion, the echo of secrets too heavy to stay buried. I could hear my father's voice somewhere below, low and strained, the tone he used when something threatened to unravel. My mother's softer, more careful. Always the diplomat, even in disaster. Julian was gone. No note, no explanation. Just that letter, and the hollow silence of someone who detonated truth and walked away from the explosion. I opened it. Inside were bank statements, ancient, yellowed, stained. But it wasn't the money that caught my attention. It was the signature at the bottom. Not my father's, my grandfather's. And next to it, another name, Elias Vance, Julian's father. The letter wasn't a contract, it was a confession. It spoke of a joint investment between the Vance and Moretti families, one that had ended in betrayal, fire, and a single death that had been ruled an accident. But buried in the paragraphs of legal jargon was something worse. My family hadn't just taken the Vance fortune, they'd framed Elias Vance for a crime he didn't commit. And when the scandal ruined him, my grandfather bought the Vance estate at a fraction of its worth. The empire I was raised to protect had been built on a stolen grave. My breath trembled as the rain hit harder. The words blurred, not from time, from tears. All those speeches about honor, loyalty, legacy, all lies. Julian's revenge wasn't about money. It was inheritance reclamation. He wasn't marrying into wealth. He was taking back what was his. Brick by brick, bloodline by bloodline. The bedroom door creaked open. My mother stood there, pale as the marble floors. She saw the letter in my hands and went still. Her eyes, usually sharp and certain, now looked ancient. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. "From your new son-in-law," I said, "the man you sold me to." Her lips parted, but no sound came. The color drained from her face. "Angela, listen to me carefully. You don't understand what you've just done." "No, Mother," I said, rising. "I finally understand everything." Thunder cracked outside. The lights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. In the dark, her voice trembled. "He's not here to destroy your father," she said. "He's here to finish what his father started." And then, almost too softly to hear, "He's here for you." The storm raged outside like it had been waiting decades to return. Lightning cracked across the vineyard, turning every shadow into a flash of confession. My mother's words echoed inside me, heavy and incomplete. "He's here for you." For me? I wanted to demand answers, but before I could speak, she turned and walked away, quickly, almost desperately, disappearing down the corridor as if pursued by ghosts only she could see. The house groaned again, and I followed her, barefoot, the hem of my gown dragging behind like a shroud. The smell of rain and old smoke filled the air. When I reached the main hall, I saw my father standing by the grand fireplace, a decanter of bourbon in his hand, his tie loosened, eyes bloodshot, expression hollow. The kind of look a man gets when the empire he built starts whispering back to him. "You opened it, didn't you?" he said without turning around. "You mean the letter you hid for 30 years, I snapped. "The one that proves everything you ever taught me was a lie?" He sighed, slow and deliberate. "Angela, we did what we had to. You think you understand legacy, but you don't. You protect the name no matter the cost, because without it, we're nothing?" I interrupted. "Is that it? You traded your soul for the family crest?" He turned then, and in his eyes I saw something worse than guilt. Belief. "The Vances tried to destroy us," he said. "Your grandfather did what was necessary. Elias Vance made his choice when he crossed our line. And you made yours when you sold me to his son," I said quietly. The fire cracked, sending sparks leaping into the air. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then my father's voice dropped low, almost pleading. "Julian isn't what you think he is, Angela. He's dangerous. You can't trust him." I stepped closer. "Then why does it sound like he's the only one who ever told me the truth?" Outside, a flash of lightning illuminated the vines, and for just a heartbeat I saw someone standing among them. A figure, still, watching Julian. His white shirt clung to his frame, soaked through by rain, his eyes fixed on the house as if he could see straight through the walls, through me. My father followed my gaze. His hand trembled around the glass. "He shouldn't be here," he whispered. "Why?" I asked. He swallowed hard, then finally said the words that made the air leave my lungs. "Because the night Elias Vance died, your grandfather wasn't the only one at the fire." I stared at him, unblinking. "Then who else was there?" He didn't answer, he just looked at me, and in that silence I already knew the truth had always been burning right beneath the soil of our vineyard. And now the flames were coming home. By midnight the storm had turned savage. Wind tore at the vines, ripping leaves from their stems like pages from a confession no one wanted to read. The thunder rolled low and relentless, a voice older than the estate itself, reminding us all that nothing built on blood stays standing forever. From the balcony, I could see Julian walking between the rows of grapes, his figure illuminated in brief bursts of lightning. He moved like a man retracing steps he'd once taken in another life. Slower now, but purposeful. The earth seemed to recognize him. Behind me, my father's voice cut through the storm. "You don't know what he's capable of, Angela." I turned slowly. "I know exactly what he's capable of," I said. "He's capable of telling the truth." "The truth?" My father's tone snapped. "You think you want the truth? You wouldn't be standing here if you knew what we buried under this land." His words hit harder than thunder. For a second I couldn't breathe. "What did you bury?" I whispered. He hesitated, just for a moment, but in that pause I saw it. The flicker of guilt that gives every liar away. Down below, a flash of light, fire. Not from the sky, from the ground. Julian had lit a torch. He held it high, staring up at the house as if daring my father to come down. The wind caught his voice, carrying it through the rain. "Tell her, Richard. Tell her what your family did the night my father burned." My father froze, the color draining from his face. His bourbon glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. I ran toward the stairs, but his voice stopped me. "Don't go out there." "You had your chance to tell me," I said. "Now I'll hear it from him." The doors burst open as I reached the bottom of the staircase. Rain swept through the hall, extinguishing the fire in the hearth. Julian stood in the doorway, soaked, trembling, and yet somehow calm. In his other hand he carried something wrapped in oilcloth. He walked past me, straight toward my father. "I found it," he said quietly. "Right where you left it, beneath the east vines." He unwrapped the cloth. Inside, a scorched metal emblem glinted in the candlelight. The Vance family crest. My father took one step back. "That can't be," he muttered. Julian's eyes burned brighter than the torch still flickering behind him. "You didn't just ruin my father, Richard," he said. "You killed him, and you buried the proof under your own vineyard." Lightning cracked again. The torch outside toppled, setting the nearest vines ablaze. Fire began to crawl across the fields, the same fields my family swore were sacred. My father turned to me, his voice desperate now. "Angela, you have to stop him." But I didn't move. I couldn't, because as I watched the flames spread, I realized something horrifying. Julian wasn't destroying my family's legacy. He was purifying it, and in some terrible, undeniable way, Part of me wanted to let him. The smell of burning vines clung to the air, rich, sweet, and sickening. Smoke coiled against the storm, twisting upward like a black prayer. I stood in the doorway, half-shadowed, watching two men, my husband and my father, locked in a silence older than either of them. The fire outside painted everything in gold and crimson, like the past itself had come alive to demand repayment. My father's breath was ragged, each inhale heavier than the— "You think this makes you righteous?" he said, voice trembling. "You think fire cleanses sin?" Julian didn't answer, he just set the metal crest on the table between them. That single scorched relic of everything they'd both lost. "This isn't about cleansing," he said, "it's about remembering. Your father thought he could bury the truth under vines and money, but every drop of wine your family ever sold was grown in the ashes of mine." The words hit like stones. I could feel their weight in my bones. My father turned to me, his face pale, sweat slicking his temples. "Angela," he whispered, "listen to me, he's lying. His father—" Julian's voice cut through like glass. "My father burned alive in this vineyard, Richard. Your men called it an accident, but I've seen the records, the chemicals, the falsified insurance claim. You watched him die so your family could take his land." "That's not true," my father shouted. But his eyes told a different story. The room shook with thunder, the lights flickered, and in that flicker, for one terrible instant, I saw my father not as the man who raised me, but as a boy who once inherited someone else's crime. I stepped forward slowly. "Tell me the truth, Dad," I said. "Did you know?" He closed his eyes, shaking his head, not to deny, but to delay. "It was supposed to be contained," he muttered. "The fire wasn't meant to spread. Your grandfather—" "Lit it," Julian finished. The silence that followed was unbearable. Rain lashed against the windows, hissing where it met flame. My father's shoulders sagged. "Your grandfather built this family with his bare hands," he whispered. "And when Elias threatened to expose him, he made a choice. He thought it would end there." Julian's jaw tightened. It didn't. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small black and white photo. Two boys, maybe 10 years old, standing side by side in front of the original vineyard. My father. And Julian's, smiling, innocent. Before everything burned, Julian looked at me, his voice breaking for the first time. "I didn't come here to kill your father, Angela. I came to show you what inheritance really means." I glanced back through the open doors, the flames devouring the vines, the rain fighting but failing to put them out. My family's fortune was turning to smoke, and for the first time I wondered if that was exactly what it deserved. By dawn the rain had slowed, but the vineyard was unrecognizable, a black sea of ash stretching out beyond the windows. The fire had eaten everything my family ever claimed to protect. The vines, the barrels, the soil that fed our name. What remained were ghosts, not just of the dead, but of every lie we'd ever called legacy. Julian stood outside, his suit torn, face streaked with soot. He looked both victorious and hollow, like a man who had finally won the war he was born into, and found no peace in the victory. I stepped onto the scorched earth, barefoot again, feeling the warmth still radiating beneath the ashes. The air tasted of smoke and iron. Somewhere beneath it all, the scent of grapes lingered, faint, haunting, refusing to die. He didn't look at me when he spoke. "It's done," he said. "They can't hide anymore. Everything that was stolen, it's gone." "Gone?" I echoed. "So that's justice?" He turned then slowly, his eyes dark, rimmed with exhaustion. "Justice?" he repeated. "There's no justice for people like us. There's only inheritance, and what we choose to do with it." Behind us, my father stood in the doorway, trembling, his once impeccable suit now smeared with ash, his hands shaking as he watched his empire dissolve into dust. My mother beside him, silent, eyes red but dry, as if even grief had become a luxury she could no longer afford. I looked at them both, and for the first time I didn't feel fear or anger, just a quiet, strange clarity. "You told me legacy was something we were born to PR. Protect," I said. "But all you ever protected was your guilt." My father's mouth opened, but no sound came. He was a man hollowed out by his own lies. Julian knelt down and scooped a handful of ash into his palm, letting it fall slowly through his fingers. "This is what your family built," he said, "and this is what mine was buried beneath." I watched the ash scatter into the wind, glowing faintly in the rising sun. Something inside me shifted, not broken but awakening. I walked past him, toward the old storage cellar that had survived the fire. My steps echoed off the charred ground. The door was half open, smoke curling from within. Inside I found old ledgers, maps, and letters, untouched by flame. Proof of everything, every deceit, every theft. Julian followed me inside. "What are you doing?" he asked. I held up one of the ledgers. "I'm ending it," I said. "If our families wrote this story in blood and greed, then I'll write the last chapter myself." His expression softened, not pity, not pride, just understanding. "You'll destroy them," he warned. "No," I said, "I'll reveal them." For a long moment neither of us spoke. The world outside was silent, burned clean, stripped of illusion. I handed him one of the ledgers. "You wanted the truth," I said. "Now help me make sure no one ever buries it again." He looked at the book, then at me, and for the first time his voice was almost gentle. "Then this time," he said, "the fire will serve you." The morning after the fire, silence ruled the vineyard like a curse. No workers, no machinery. "Traction process," Julian said softly. "The vineyard's fertility, its flavor, its value, it all came from the soil enriched by what they buried here. This estate wasn't just fed by nature. It was fed by sacrifice." The words struck like a blade. I thought of the workers who vanished over the years. The accidents, the unexplained deaths, the richness of our harvests. Everything began to align. Every missing piece of the family myth. Every success built on silence. Every toast raised in someone's absence. Julian's voice dropped to a near whisper. "Your parents didn't just inherit corruption, they cultivated it." I stared at him, at the ash streaked on his face. My breath caught in my throat. "Don't touch it again," he said. "It remembers blood, it recognizes lineage." The realization struck me like lightning. My family hadn't just been feeding this land for generations. The land had been feeding on us. Julian's face was pale as ash. "Angela, this vineyard isn't your inheritance. It's your prison." I looked down at the writhing soil, still trembling, still whispering beneath the stone basin, and for the first time I realized it wasn't just alive, it was hungry. Julian's words echoed through that underground chamber like a curse that had finally spoken itself aloud. "This vineyard isn't your inheritance, it's your prison." The phrase wrapped around my ribs and tightened. I looked back at the basin. The soil inside it seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting in rhythm with my own chest as though it had learned my pulse. Julian, he roofed with relentless fury. Yet inside everything was worse. The air was still, thick, electric with something unseen. Julian stood across from me, his face half hidden by shadow, half illuminated by the dying glow of the fire. His eyes no longer looked kind. They looked ancient. He spoke slowly, as if each word carried weight older than language. "Angela, the land has chosen you. The pact must be renewed, or everything your family built will rot from the roots up." I shook my head, trembling. "No, I'm not part of their corruption. I didn't make that promise." He stepped closer, his voice soft but unrelenting. "It doesn't matter. The soil doesn't care about innocence, it only remembers bloodlines, it knows who you are." His hand brushed my arm, and the ground responded. The floorboards beneath us creaked, breathing. The same pulse we'd heard in the chamber now thudded faintly beneath our feet, spreading through the house like a heartbeat waking from centuries of sleep. "They tried to stop it once," Julian murmured. "But the land always takes what it's owed. That's why your father came to me. He needed someone who understood the old ways, someone who could control it." I stumbled back, realization hitting me like ice water. Control it, or feed it? His silence was answer enough. Lightning flashed outside, lighting up the room for one breathless second. And in that light, I saw them. Faces pressed against the windows, pale, half-formed like smoke and bone, watching, waiting, the ancestors. Julian's tone hardened. "Angela, if you don't finish the ritual, they'll take everything. Not just the vineyard, your name, your soul, your future. The land will consume it all." I clenched my fists, anger cutting through my fear. "Then let it." Julian slammed his hand against the wall, and the entire house shuddered. Wine bottles on the shelf burst one by one, staining the walls with deep crimson streaks that looked far too much like blood. "You think you can defy it?" he roared. "You can't fight what you are." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small silver blade, etched with the same circular serpent sigil carved beneath the vineyard. My heart stopped. "I don't want to hurt you," he said quietly, stepping closer. "But if you don't give the soil its due, it'll take more than just you. It'll come for everyone tied to your name." The fire flickered low. I could feel the pulse rising through the floorboards now. The rhythm of something that lived beneath us, something vast, ancient, and starving. Julian raised the blade between us. The metal gleamed like moonlight on water. "It's one cut, Angela, One drop of blood and it ends. You'll save your name, your legacy, and me. The mention of himself stopped me cold. You? He hesitated, eyes darkening. I was born of it too. The same soil that feeds your blood feeds mine. I've been bound to this curse for generations. If the ritual isn't renewed... He took my hand gently, almost pleading now. We both die. I stared into his eyes and saw the truth. He wasn't my savior or my captor. He was its servant. And the land beneath our feet was already waking, whispering in voices that sounded like my ancestors calling my name. Angela. 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 The whispering grew louder, wrapping around me like 1,000 invisible hands. Each voice carried a memory, a regret, a scream trapped in the roots of the earth. My ancestors, their words layered in agony and hunger, crying out the same command over and over. Obey the soil, feed the vine. But I didn't bow. I couldn't. Not this time. Julian's blade gleamed between us, trembling in the flickering firelight. The storm outside beat against the windows like the fists of restless ghosts. Every pulse of thunder felt like a warning from the land itself. Angela, he said, his voice softer now, almost breaking. Don't fight this. You can't rewrite the covenant of blood. I stared at him, my breath shallow. Maybe not, but I can end it. He stepped closer. You think you're the first to try? Every generation had one heir who resisted. They all vanished. The soil remembers rebellion. I felt something inside me crack, not from fear but fury. All those lives, sacrificed, erased, devoured in the name of legacy. My parents, my grandparents, none of them were saviors. They were prisoners masquerading as royalty. The storm thundered again, shaking the walls. The old portraits lining the hallway began to peel from their frames, the paint blistering, faces melting into the same red-black shade of the cursed soil below. Julian reached for me. It's not too late, but I caught his wrist mid-motion, forcing the blade downward. Our struggle was silent at first, only the sound of breath and the creak of the old wooden floorboards between us. Then he whispered, voice trembling with something that wasn't fear but sorrow. If you destroy it, you destroy me too. And suddenly I understood the final cruelty of the curse. He wasn't lying. His life, his entire bloodline, was tied to mine, intertwined like the vines themselves. He was the soil's other half, the one who carried its will. But the truth didn't weaken me. It clarified everything. I pushed him back with all my strength, and the silver blade clattered across the floor, spinning until it stopped at the base of the hearth. Flames reflected in its surface like a burning eye. The house groaned again. The floorboards buckled, and from beneath the sound of roots tearing through earth. Climbing upward. The soil was coming. Julian dropped to his knees, his face pale, desperate. Angela, if you break the cycle, the land will devour itself. It'll take everything. Tears streamed down my face. Then let it burn. The moment I said it, something shifted. The storm outside turned crimson. The air grew unbearably hot. The vines pressed against the windows, curling like serpents. Julian screamed as the earth split beneath him, roots bursting from the floor, wrapping around his body, pulling him toward the cellar door. His eyes locked onto mine, wide with terror and something deeper, love, or maybe regret. Angela, you were supposed to save us. I whispered through gritted teeth, I am. I grabbed the silver blade, cut my palm open and let my blood drip into the fire. The flames roared higher, white-hot, pure. The entire house trembled. The vines recoiled, shrieking. The soil beneath us screamed like something ancient being torn from its throne. Julian's voice broke into 1,000 echoes. You've undone everything. And I looked him in the eye one last time. No, I've freed it. The roots dragged him into the floor, the boards sealing shut behind him like flesh knitting over a wound. The storm outside went silent. The heartbeat beneath the house stopped. For the first time in centuries, the land was quiet. I stood there, bloodied, shaking, staring into the dying fire as dawn crept through the broken windows. The curse was broken. But the cost was everything.